Zito. Selena Zito is a fantastic journalist. She does what journalists used to do. She really walks the beat. She interviews people. She has a relationship with the people of Pennsylvania and people of other parts of the country like nobody else, because she goes to their diners, she goes to their farms, she goes to the rail station, she does all those things. She has written a book here, and I hope I am able to convey this as well as I can, simply called Butler, The Untold Story of the Near Assassination of Donald Trump and the Fight for America's Heartland. You're going to learn things in this book, beautifully written, story after story after story. I'll give an example, and I want to welcome you to the program. You start off the book with George Washington. I didn't know that George Washington in 1753, he was a major in the militia, basically on behalf of the crown, and the French and the British are starting to scuffle over the land in this area, which is now called Butler, and he was almost assassinated, correct?
Yes, absolutely. With not far from where President Trump was almost assassinated.
And you write in your book, I just want to read this one paragraph, and then I want to get into it, but I want you to understand in the audience, I'm barely touching the surface of the beautiful book, going into the things you didn't know and I did not know. And you're in the front row, and you're there, you're hearing the bullets, you're watching what's going on, you're wondering about your own life, but in the meantime, you're watching the President of the United States and these other people who are almost mortally wounded, and one is. 6:06 p.m., Thomas Crooks ripped off 4 shots toward the main stage where Trump was speaking. The candidate had just turned ever so slightly to his right. 1 bullet grazed his right ear, another bullet mortally wounded Compatore, and the other 2 shots gravely wounded spectators, David Dutch, a 57-year-old U.S. Marine. We never hear about these people, a veteran from New Kensington, Pennsylvania, and James Koppenhaver, 74, in Moon Township, Pennsylvania. Tell us what it was like at that moment. You explain it in excruciating detail in the book where you really feel like you're there. And truly, I think people understand, but the emotion of how close we came to losing Donald Trump.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, as a journalist, usually the end of your day doesn't end up the way your day started as to what you were supposed to do. And that was true for me that day. I wasn't supposed to be in the buffer. I was there with my daughter, who is a photojournalist, and I was only 4 feet from the president. And as I heard the shots go off, pop, 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 I knew exactly what it was. I'm from Western Pennsylvania. I'm a gun owner, like most people in Western Pennsylvania. And I never got down. I watched it and when people say something happens in slow motion, that happened in slow motion. I watched a sea of blue go around him. I watched that he didn't fall down, but he took himself down. That was my first understanding that maybe he's not as hurt as he could possibly be. I saw the blood streak across his face. That's how close I was. It wasn't until the second round of shots came by that a campaign press advance person took me down to protect me. There's an iconic photo of him literally laying on top of me to protect me. But I watched the entire thing. My recorder was on, not because I was trying to record that, but it was because I was recording the speech. And I watched the president talking back and forth with his Secret Service agents and insisting that he puts his shoes on. And eventually walk right past me. It was several of the things struck me about that day, Mark. Nobody panicked. You would expect in that situation to be mass hysteria, and there wasn't. I heard some screaming, but that was it. And I watched the president, and people don't know this, and this is something from the book I really want to convey to people. Before he said fight, 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 because he's facing me, he says USA first. And the next morning, President Trump called me really early in the morning. And I'll probably get in trouble with my parents for saying this, but the first thing he said to me was, "Are you okay? Is your daughter okay?" And I said, "Are you bleeping kidding me? You're the one that was shot." He would go on to call me several times that day. One of the most significant moments in the book is when he describes to me why he says fight, fight, fight. It wasn't about him. It was about projecting strength for the country. It was about showing he knew people there would panic. He knew people watching would panic. He said to me in an interview, and he reiterated that last week when I interviewed him on Air Force One. He said, it wasn't me at that moment. I represent being president of the United States, even though I wasn't president in that moment. And it was important to show the country that we are okay and we are resilient.
It's so emotional. I'm sitting here tearing right now, thinking about what happened that day. Your explanation of it, which I've never read anything like this before, your conveyance, your portrayal of this man who he really is, that the press never really covers. Yeah. He is cerebral, but he's passionate. He's thinking about the country all the time and the people around him all the time, and you make that clear in the book. Welcome back, America. I want to stress that we're barely touching the surface. This book comes out July 8th. You can pre-order it on Amazon. I want to strongly encourage you. This is a real book, a serious book, not like Jake Tapper and what's her name, who was the press secretary to buy. This is an important, serious book. I happen to believe one of those, Selena Zito, where God did have his hand on Donald Trump's shoulder. Yes. I can think of no other explanation. Now, you interviewed him recently. And tell me his thoughts briefly about and his emotions when you were interviewing about this day.
There's a chapter in the book called The Hand of God, and he and I talked extensively about God being in that moment when he made those decisions to turn the way he did when he brought the chart down. But I was with him last week and doing an interview for the anniversary, and it is clear, and this has happened, you see it throughout the book, too, because we interviewed and talked, and the book takes you through the rest of the election in places where people weren't paying attention as to what was happening and how things were changing. But when we were talking about it last week, he became very emotional talking about it, very reflective, very quiet, and it's tough for him to relive that moment. And it's not just because of him. He has this deep sense of protection for the Compatoré family. Corey Compatoré was the fire chief that was killed that day, and that really guts him that man died that day, and he has never forgotten that. But he is also very, very aware of the importance of faith and God in that moment, and that is why you see him operating with the urgency that he is now, because he believes that he was saved and that he only has a short window of time to accomplish the things that he thinks and he believes are best for the country.
That is so beautifully put. It's such a beautiful book as you explain these events and then the subsequent campaign and how he reacted to different events taking place. He really is, people need to understand, a true humanitarian. The media in this country are so corrupt, so dishonest, so ideologically hateful that they want you to believe he's the worst human being who's ever walked on the face of the earth. And when you read this book, and if you know him as I do, and some other people know him, you know how outrageously disgusting this portrayal of him is by the general media. And this goes a long way. Your fantastic book, Butler, goes a long way in fixing this. And I want to encourage everybody in this audience, get your copy, pre-order your copy. You'll get it on July 8th. It is a fantastic book. It's not a gossip book. It's not a memoir. It's not a how-to book. This is a book that will be remembered through history because you actually capture everything with your eyes. And it takes me back, Selena Zito, to people who remember the unfortunate assassination of Abraham Lincoln, who were on the spot, reporters and others, who actually wrote about it. people who remember the assassination of McKinley, people who remember the assassination of JFK, the attempted assassination of Ronald Reagan. And you have done so much to preserve the real history and the real events that took place then and thereafter. My final question to you is this. Are you amazed at how soon after this assassination attempt, not just an attempt, they hit him in the head, they hit him in the ear, that here he picks himself up, as difficult as it is emotionally and for his family, and he continues his campaign for president?
It was like watching two different worlds, because I saw him take himself up. I saw him the next 2 days later in Wisconsin at the RNC, and I saw him over and over and over again in Pennsylvania campaigning. And the way this story disappeared really stunned me. And the way there was a lack of intellectual curiosity about what makes this man go. Why is he consistently not stopping? Why is he continually campaigning? Why didn't he just take a day off? None of that happened. None of that was explored. The final chapter in my book is all about my profession, what has happened with my profession, and it's called The Reckoning, and I believe that we are in that moment.
I love your book. I hope people will grab it. It's called Butler. Pre-order Amazon.com, folks. This is really inspiring. It's incredibly emotional, and it's factual for once. I want to thank you, Selena Zito. God bless you, my friend. Great job.
Thank you, Mark.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.